Hey Arabella, it's Mrs. Whitman. I am making this video for you today. Thank you to you and your mom for reaching out and asking for help. This is a very tricky page because we are not very used to seeing equations with two numbers on both sides of the equal sign. And in addition to having two numbers, one of those numbers is a blank over on the right side of the equal sign. So that makes it even more difficult. I know that you're probably wondering, well, how am I possibly going to solve all of this? So I think what I'm going to do is just try to drill this down into really simple terms at first. I'm going to go backwards a little bit before I start tackling some of these numbers. So we're used to seeing equations like this, right? 3 plus 4 equals 7. Simple. I'm used to seeing two things on the left and just one answer on the right. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong to have more than one thing on both sides of the equal sign, okay? We just have to get used to seeing it that way and then really understand what that means. And the easiest way that I can make you understand or help you understand what this means is to get you to think of an equation like it's a balance or a scale. And Arabella, you probably have seen a scale at school before or maybe in the grocery store. And on this scale, I'm going to put on the left side, let me draw a line here. I want you to think of, both sides, the left side of the scale and the right side of the scale. On the left side, I'm going to put, let's see, a group of 3 things right here. And then I'm going to have another group right next to it of 6 things. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be apples, oranges, it could be weights. Doesn't really matter, okay? Now, on this side, the right side, I'm going to have a group of 2. Okay, and then I'm going to have a pretend little bucket, okay? Now, if I asked you how many of these, let's just say they're blueberries since they're blue and circular shaped, okay? Pretend they're blueberries. If I asked you, Arabella, to fill up the bucket with enough blueberries to balance this scale, you would look at this, and I bet that you would be able to put enough blueberries in that bucket to make both sides the same, right? To make both sides balanced and equal. You would probably do something like this. You would probably count the number of blueberries that are on the left side first. I see 3 here in this pile. 6 here in this pile, giving us a total of 9 blueberries on that side. But over here, I only see 2 blueberries in that pile. So if I'm going to balance this and make both sides of my scale the same so that one side isn't heavier than the other, then I need to drop in enough blueberries to make 2 plus something equal 9, because remember, we have to make it match. And if this side of the balance is 9, then the right side of the balance must equal 9 too, okay? So what we could do is we could start at 2, since we know we already have 2, and then we could count up from there to see how many more blueberries it's going to take to get to 9, okay? So you can do this with me on your fingers. 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you were counting on your fingers, then you probably have 7 fingers up right now. So that's how many blueberries I would need to drop into this little bucket. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In order to balance my scale and make sure that both sides weigh the same. Okay? So keep that in mind as I start to explain number 2 for you, okay? An equation is really no different than a scale. Both sides of the equal sign, Okay, that's the equal sign being like our tipping point or the fulcrum of the scale, this thing, right? Both sides of the equal sign have to be balanced. They have to be the same. In our blueberry example, both sides ended up being 9. So what is tricky about this is that you're going to have to do a little bit of math first to figure out what both sides has to equal, okay? For example, let me make some room here, just a second. Okay, in number 2, in order to figure out what both sides of my equal sign has to equal, I've got to do this math first right here. Whoops. I've got to do 266 plus 235. Just like in the blueberry example when I did 3 plus 6 equals 9, I've got to do that math first, okay? So let's write that out going vertically, 266 plus 235. 6 plus 5 is 11, regroup. 1 plus 6 plus 3 is 10, again regroup. 1 plus 2 is 5. Okay. So now I know that this side, the left side of my equal sign is 501. Okay, so if I'm thinking of this like it's a scale, I'm going to erase my, well, no, I'll try to keep that on there for reference. Let me just get rid of that. Okay, so if I'm thinking of this like it's my blueberry example and I have a scale, here's my scale. On this side, I'm just going to draw a bucket because I am not about to draw 501 circles of little blueberries. That would take way too long. So pretend with me, if you will. You have 501 blueberries in this bucket on your scale, okay? And remember that this is the same as the equal sign, that fulcrum, okay? So now, in order to balance my scale, I need to have another little bucket on the right side. And I know it has to equal the same thing. But the problem is that I have a blank and I have minus 225. So that's where it starts to throw us off, okay? Something minus 225 has to equal, okay, because I have that equal sign, 501. So I want you to start thinking about a term called, in math, we use this term a lot. Let me make myself some more room here. There's a very important thing in math called reasonability. Whoa, Mrs. Whitman needs to work on her spelling. Let me try that again. Reasonability. And that just means you gotta do what makes sense. Okay, your answer needs to be reasonable. For example, if we go back to the classic example of 2 plus 2 equals 4. Okay, let's say I take out one of those 2's. Okay, now you and I both know that that's going to be a 2 right there. But if I'm talking about the concept of reasonability, and if I were going to try and guess what number goes in that blank, let's say I've never done 2 plus 2 in my life before. And so I just have to try to guess because I don't know any other way to figure this out. Well, would it be reasonable for me to put, let's say, 50 in the blank? No, it wouldn't be reasonable, right? Because 50 is way more than 4. Which is the number that we're trying to get. So it wouldn't make any sense to put a bigger number in the blank than the answer that we're trying to get, would it? If we're talking about reasonability, then would it be reasonable, more reasonable in this case, to, let's say, put the number 1 in the blank? Yeah, it would be more reasonable, right? Because at least I know when I do 2 plus 1, if I count on from 2, that's going to give me 3. So it's still not the right answer, but it's a way more reasonable guess because 3 is at least a little bit closer to 4, okay? So how does this relate to our problem? Well, you're going to have to do some guesswork. okay? You're going to have to look at that blank that we just made right here and think about, okay, what is a reasonable number to put in that blank that when I subtract 225, I'm going to end up with 501, okay? Now, just for the sake of making this a little bit easier for you, I want you to we're just going to round 225 to 200 for now. I want you to think of it as 200, okay? Because it doesn't really matter what the exact answer is at the moment. Something minus 200. What would get us close to, let's think of this as 500. Well, maybe a reasonable guess would be, let's try 800, okay? Because I know whatever I put in this blank has to be bigger than 500 because I've got to start with a bigger number when I'm taking away something. I'm going to put a big number in that blank, and I'm going to be taking away 200 from that number. So that number that I put in the blank must be bigger than 500, okay? So let's just try it. Let's just try 800 and see what happens. Okay, 800. 800 minus 200. Well, I know that's 600. Now, does 600 equal 500? No, it does not. So, it was a reasonable number to put in there. We're not too far off, but it still is not the correct answer, okay? But we got pretty close. We were just 100 off. So what if instead of 800, what if I try 700? Since I was just 100 off, maybe I just need to go a little bit smaller, and then maybe that will take me to my answer, okay? So let's do that. Let's do 700 minus 200. Okay, 700 minus 200 is 500. Now, that makes this equation true. But the problem is, those are not the exact numbers that we're dealing with, right? We were dealing with 225 and 501. But you know what this has done for me? This has narrowed it down for me. And now I can look at that answer bank and I can see, is there a number in this answer bank that is close to 700 that might work here? Well, I see that C is in the 700s. Oh, but I also have, look at this, 719. F is also in the 700s. Oops, and I see one more. I was also in the 700s. Okay, so let's just go down the list and let's try one, and let's sometimes that's what you have to do. You just have to try something, see if it works, and then move on to the next one if it doesn't. So I'm going to put 726 in this blank here, since that was the first one I came across, okay? Let's give that a try. So I'm going to rewrite it vertically so it's easier for me to do the subtraction. 726 minus 225. 6 minus 5 is 1. 2 minus 2 is 0. 7 minus 2 is 5. And hey, look at that. That balances our scales because that was what we were looking for on the other side of the scale. Or in our case, since we're talking about equations, that's the number that was on the other side of the equation. So in order to get 501, I have to put the number 726 in the blank, or C, okay? My recommendation for you is that when you're continuing on with the rest of this, solve one side of the equal sign first, the side that has two numbers to work with, and then you're going to have to just try to do some guesswork first, and remember to make reasonable guesses that make sense to try to figure out what goes in the blank. And after that, look at your answer key and try to plug those numbers into the blank and see if it works. You're going to need lots of scratch paper for this and lots of patience. This page is not going to go quickly, okay? It's a lot of guess and check work, and most importantly, it's about patience and being willing to make mistakes and try again. So I hope that helped you and didn't confuse you even more. If it did, let me know, reach out, and I'll make another video for you. All right, thanks, Arabella. I'll talk to you soon.